At 2:15 a.m. on August 7, 1944, Sergeant Robert Callahan lay flat in the wet Norman dirt, his cheek pressed against the cold steel of a 3-inch M5 anti-tank gun. He couldn't see more than 15 feet in front of him. The fog was so thick it swallowed the hedgerows, the road, even the stars. But he could hear them. Heavy diesel engines, steel tracks grinding against pavement. Panther tanks, moving slow, deliberate, unstoppable. Callahan was 26 years old. He'd been with the 823rd Tank Destroyer Battalion for 11 months. He had trained to fight tanks he could see, aim at, calculate range for. No one had trained him for this fighting blind. Somewhere beyond the fog, nearly 200 German tanks were advancing toward Mortagne as part of Hitler's last gamble in Normandy, Operation Luttich, for elite panzer divisions, SS units hardened by years of war. Their objective was simple breakthrough, reach Ivrinches, and cut the American armies in half. Callahan had one gun, 3 tons of steel. No armor, no engine, no retreat once the shooting started. Company A of the 823rd had arrived at Mortagne just 3 days earlier. 12 towed guns spread thin across a collapsing front. Intelligence had warned them the night before German armor was massing to the east, but warnings don't stop tanks. Fog does strange things to battlefields. It hides movement. It erases distance. It turns sound into deception. And that night, the fog favored the attackers. Then, without warning, the darkness flashed orange. A German tank fired blind, its muzzle blast briefly tearing a hole in the fog. The shell screamed overhead and detonated somewhere behind Callahan's position. In that instant, he understood the problem with terrifying clarity. If he fired back, the flash from his gun would give him away. Every tank out there would know exactly where he was. But if he didn't fire, the tanks would roll forward until they were close enough to kill him anyway. Fire first and die. Stay silent and die. Callahan had seconds to choose. He raised his hand and gave the signal. The gun swung toward the fading glow where the flash had been. The loader slammed around into the breech. High explosive, not armor. No time to change. This wasn't a shot aimed at steel. It was a shot aimed at fire in the fog. At 2:45 a.m., the American gun fired. For 3 seconds, the world exploded into light. The fog lit up like a lantern, revealing hedgerows, broken fences, churned earth, and then darkness returned. Somewhere out there, something detonated. Secondary explosions. Ammunition cooking off. They had hit a tank they never saw. And now every German gun was turning to war. Then what happened next would decide not just the fate of 12 men behind an obsolete weapon, but the fate of an entire German offensive. The moment Callahan's gun fired, the rules of the battlefield changed. The fog that had hidden them now betrayed them. German engines surged. Tracks clattered faster. Somewhere ahead, tank commanders were shouting orders inside steel hulls, relayed blindly through headsets and hand signals. They had not expected resistance here, not in this density, not this quickly. This sector east of Mortagne was supposed to be thinly held, a screen, something to brush aside. Instead, a single muzzle flash had announced that Americans were waiting. Callahan did not wait to see the result of his shot. He counted silently 1, 2, 3 and then slashed his hand downward. The crew moved instantly. 5 men seized the trails of the 3-ton gun and dragged it sideways through the dirt. Muscles screaming, boots slipping in wet soil, 30 feet north. No more, no less. That distance might be the difference between survival and annihilation. They dug again with frantic speed, shovels biting into clay, breath ragged. The loader slammed an armor-piercing round into the breech this time. If another Panther appeared, they would need penetration, not blast. Seconds later, German shells slammed into the position they had just abandoned. 3 impacts, one after another. Earth geysered upward. Shrapnel tore through empty space where the gun had been moments earlier. The fog had saved them, but only temporarily. Another flash erupted deeper in the gray, farther east. Callahan felt, rather than saw it, a bloom of light swallowed almost instantly by mist. He pointed. The gunner traversed. No range calculation, no certainty, just instinct, sound, and a fading memory of where light had existed. Fire. The recoil punched back. The fog lit again. This time, the explosion that followed was unmistakable. Flames rolled upward, orange bleeding into white smoke. A Panther burned somewhere beyond sight. Its crew bailed out blindly, silhouettes stumbling into nothingness. This was not doctrine. This was survival. Along the line, other guns began firing. Company A, stretched thin across hedgerows and sunken roads, joined the fight. Each muzzle flash became a signal flare. Each shot invited death. The battlefield turned into a violent exchange of light, brief, blinding, and lethal. At 0300 hours, a gun 200 yards south went silent. A single German round had found it squarely. Callahan heard the explosion, felt it in his chest, then nothing. No movement, no return fire. One gun gone, 5 men with it. The Germans slowed. Engines idled. The advance paused. Panther crews were adapting. They spread out, probing, maneuvering laterally instead of forward. Infantry followed behind Panzer Grenadiers, slipping through hedgerows, moving low, searching for the guns with grenades and machine pistols. Callahan saw shadows moving in the fog. Human shapes, this time, closer, much closer. The M5 gun was useless against infantry at this range. The crew's only defense was a single Thompson submachine gun and rifles slung uselessly over shoulders, slick with sweat. Firing now would reveal their position again, but letting the Germans close meant being overrun. He waited. 40 feet. 30. The Thompson erupted in short bursts. 5 figures collapsed almost instantly. The rest vanished back into the fog. Return fire came seconds later. Tank guns, not rifles. Callahan ordered displacement again. They dragged the gun through thorn and mud, hands bleeding, lungs burning. Shells obliterated their previous position. Stone and dirt shredding the night air. By 0400, Company A was bleeding. 5 guns destroyed, nearly half their strength gone. But in exchange, 9 German tanks burned or lay disabled in fields they could barely see. The fog began thinning. This was worse. Visibility increased to 100 yards. Then 2. Enough for German optics to matter. Enough for turret gunners to aim deliberately. Enough for American gun crews to understand they were running out of borrowed time. Reinforcements. Arrived Shermans from the 743rd Tank Battalion, but their engines sounded wrong in the dark. Too light, too exposed. Panthers could kill them before they ever closed the distance. Callahan heard the results almost immediately. High-pitched cracks, explosions. Sherman crews, dying inside steel that was never meant to face Panthers head-on. Orders crackled over the radio. Hold position, no withdrawal. Infantry was pulling back. The guns were the rear guard. Callahan checked ammunition. 47 rounds left. At 0445. The fog parted just enough to reveal a shape ahead. A Panther, 300 yards. Hull down behind a hedgerow. Its turret turned slowly, methodically. Searching. The gunner whispered he had the sight. Callahan nodded. Both guns fired at once. The German round struck first ricocheting off the ground. Screaming overhead before detonating behind them, the American armor-piercing shell punched straight through the Panther's mantlet. The tank froze. Smoke poured from its hatches. As dawn crept closer, the fog thinned completely, and with clarity came revelation. They had been fighting a screen. The real German thrust had passed south through the valley. The tanks they destroyed were never meant to break through, only to delay, distract, and draw fire. And in holding them here, Company A had done exactly the same thing in return. They had stolen time. By 0500 hours, the battle east of Morta had lost all rhythm. What had begun as blind firing in fog had become something worse: measured destruction. The mist was thinning now, not lifting all at once, but peeling back layer by layer, revealing the battlefield in fragments. A hedgerow here, a road junction there, burned out hulks appearing like ghosts as the gray dissolved. With every additional yard of visibility, the balance tilted away from the men behind the guns. Sergeant Callahan felt it immediately. This was the moment they had been borrowing time against. German tanks no longer fired at flashes alone. They fired at shapes, at outlines, at movement. Panthers advanced in pairs, one moving while the other covered, turrets scanning with mechanical patience. These crews weren't panicking anymore. They had learned the American trick. Now they were hunting. Callahan's gun had fired more than 60 rounds since 0215. The barrel was hot. The crew's hands were raw. Sweat cut clean lines through dust on their faces. The loader checked the racks again. Armor piercing only. No high explosive remained. From this point forward, every shot was a gamble against steel. To the south, the sound of battle intensified. Shermans from the 743rd Tank Battalion had fully engaged. Their engines were louder, faster, and higher pitched than the Panthers, easy to distinguish, impossible to ignore. Callahan heard the crack of American 75mm guns, then the deeper German reply. He heard impacts, he heard explosions, he heard silence where engines had been seconds before. The Shermans were dying. 0515. Radio traffic broke through the disciplined silence. Battalion headquarters confirmed what the gun crews already sensed: the German advance had slowed, but not stopped. Company B was engaged near Company C was being Infantry units were pulling back 2 secondary lines. The guns were now the hinge holding the front. Together. Orders were simple and merciless. Hold. Callahan understood what that meant. No more displacement. No more trading space for time. If a Panther found them now, there would be no second chance. Artillery arrived like a fist, slamming the ground. American 105mm shells screamed overhead and detonated among the German formations. The blasts didn't kill many tanks, but they forced crews to button up, blinded optics with dirt, scattered the Panzer Grenadiers probing forward through the hedgerows. For the first time in hours, Callahan felt the pressure ease, slightly. He used the moment. The crew dragged the M5 again. this time behind a low stone wall that cut across the field. It wasn't ideal, but it offered defilade from the east and some protection against infantry. They worked fast, barely speaking, each man knowing his role without instruction. 80540. A gun to the west was overrun. Callahan saw it happen through clearing air. German infantry rushed the position while a Panther fired deliberately into the gun pit. The American crew fought back with rifles and pistols, holding for less than 2 minutes. Then the firing stopped. The gun burned. 5 more men gone. Company A was down to 5 guns. And now, with daylight coming on fast, the battlefield finally revealed its true scale. German armor stretched across the front, 30 tanks visible, more obscured behind terrain. Panthers and Panzer IVs maneuvered with confidence, infantry riding behind them, commanders standing half-exposed in turrets. This was no longer a confused night engagement. This was a deliberate, armored push. At 05. Callahan spotted movement to the north. 3 Panthers, flanking, they moved in bounds, using hedgerows like professionals, advancing while covering one another. This was elite work. 2nd SS Panzer Division tactics, refined over years of combat. If they completed the maneuver, they would fire straight down the American gun line and collapse it completely. Callahan had seconds to decide. Engage the flank and expose himself to frontal fire, ignore it and die from the side, or abandon the gun entirely. He chose none of the above. He waited. The Panthers moved closer. 200 yards, 100. Their attention fixed forward, focused on the remaining guns to the east. They had not yet identified Callahan's position. When the lead Panther cleared the hedgerow, Callahan gave the order. The gun fired at point-blank range. The armor-piercing round struck the side plate and punched through. The tank shuddered and stopped. Smoke poured from its engine deck. The second Panther reacted instantly, turrets swinging. Callahan's crew fired again. This round struck the mantlet and failed to penetrate. The German gun fired back. The shell passed inches over the gun shield, tearing through the stone wall behind them. The third Panther reversed, pulling back out of sight. The line held but barely. The fog was gone. And with full visibility came the most shocking realization of the morning. They had been fighting the wrong battle. The main German column was already south, pushing through the valley toward Ivry. The tanks Callahan and Company A had engaged were not they were the screen meant to pin American forces, draw fire, and delay response. And by holding them here for 4 hours, Company A had succeeded in doing exactly the same thing to the Germans. They had fixed 30 tanks in place. They had stolen the only thing Operation Luttich required to succeed: speed. The battlefield did not go silent after the guns stopped firing. Silence was a luxury that war never truly allowed. What followed the destruction of the gun position was something worse: a pause, a suspended moment where smoke lingered in the air, embers glowed faintly in shattered earth, and men on both sides waited to see who would move first. Inside the hedgerow, the surviving American infantry lay pressed into the mud, their bodies stiff, muscles screaming from tension. The anti-tank gun that had been their shield was now nothing more than twisted steel and blackened debris. Its crew was gone. No commands followed. No signals came down the line. For a few seconds, the Americans felt something dangerously close to abandonment. From the German side, the pause was deliberate. The Panther tanks did not rush forward immediately. Their commanders knew better. A battlefield that suddenly went quiet often concealed traps. Infantry advanced first, boots sinking softly into damp soil, rifles raised, fingers tight on triggers. Fog crept low along the ground, swallowing shapes and distances, turning men into shadows. One American soldier, barely 20, tried to steady his breathing. His helmet was cracked. His hands shook despite his effort to control them. He had fired all but 2 rounds. Every sound felt amplified: the scrape of equipment, the soft clink of metal, the distant crackle of fire. He could not see the enemy clearly, but he could feel them closing in. Then came the flare. A single German flare shot upward, slicing through the darkness, exploding into harsh white light. For a split second, everything was exposed: broken bodies, destroyed equipment, terrified faces frozen in shock. The Americans instinctively pressed lower, knowing that moment of illumination might be their death sentence. Machine gun fire erupted almost instantly. German infantry opened up from the hedgerow's edge, firing short, controlled bursts. Bullets tore into dirt and wood, ripping branches apart, chewing through cover. The Americans responded with desperate return fire, flashes of muzzle light revealing their positions even as they tried to suppress the advance. Chaos replaced the pause. Orders were shouted, misunderstood, lost entirely. One American corporal tried to rally his men, dragging a wounded soldier backward through mud slick with blood. Another soldier fumbled with a grenade, hands numb, fear threatening to override training. Somewhere nearby, someone screamed, then stopped. The Panthers moved again. Their engines roared back to life, low and menacing, vibrating through the ground like distant thunder. Slowly, methodically, they rolled forward, crushing debris beneath their tracks. They did not fire wildly. They didn't need to. Their presence alone broke morale. Every American knew what those tanks could do at close range, yet retreat was not an option. Behind them lay nothing but open ground. Ahead stood the enemy. The Americans fought not because they believed they would win, but because stopping meant dying anyway. Rifle fire cracked. A bazooka team crawled into position, knowing they had one chance, maybe two, before being spotted. The rocket launched with a violent hiss, streaking toward the nearest Panther. It struck the side armor and detonated, and failed. Smoke and sparks flared, but the tank did not stop. Its turret rotated calmly, almost lazily, until it aligned with the threat. One shot. The explosion erased the bazooka team completely. The psychological weight of that moment crushed what remained of resistance. Some Americans fired blindly now. Others froze. A few tried to run and were cut down before they made 3 steps. War stripped men of individuality until only reactions remained. And then, unexpectedly, the Germans halted again. Orders crackled over radios. Something had changed. Intelligence, timing, caution. No one on the American side knew why. But the advance paused just long enough for a handful of survivors to pull back under cover of smoke and confusion. Those men would later say that Part 3 of the battle was not about strategy or firepower. It was about the thin line between action and paralysis, the moment where courage, fear, and instinct collided, and survival depended on which one spoke loudest first. By now, the battlefield had fully transformed from chaos into inevitability. The Americans who had managed to fall back did not regroup in any meaningful sense. There was no line, no clear command structure, only clusters of exhausted men clinging to shallow cover, each group believing itself to be the last still fighting. The German pause had not been mercy, it was calculation. Panther commanders reassessed terrain and resistance, marking firing lanes, adjusting infantry spacing. This was doctrine at work. Prussia without haste. The Americans, lacking radios and heavy support, could feel the enemy reorganizing even if they could not see it. The tension returned heavier than before. Then the artillery began. Not a barrage that would have been wasteful, but precise, deliberate shelling. High explosive rounds landed behind American positions, cutting off retreat paths, forcing survivors forward into exposed ground. Dirt and fire erupted in controlled patterns. Each explosion pushed the defenders closer to collapse. One American lieutenant attempted to restore order. His voice cracked as he shouted commands, trying to anchor a defensive pocket around a shallow depression. Men listened, not because they believed in success, but because his certainty gave them something to hold on to. Leadership, even doomed, still mattered. German infantry advanced again. Closer now, using suppressive fire to pin defenders while tanks angled for optimal engagement. Machine guns raked hedgerows, tearing foliage apart, stripping away the illusion of concealment. Anyone who moved without cover became a target instantly. A second bazooka team took position. They knew the odds. They also knew that stopping even one tank might buy minutes, and minutes were everything. The shooter waited until the Panther filled his entire field of vision. The rocket fired. This time, it struck the rear quarter. The tank shuddered. Flames burst from the engine deck. Crew hatches flew open as black smoke poured upward. The Panther was not destroyed, but it was crippled. German infantry reacted immediately, forming a protective ring, firing outward to prevent follow-up attacks. The Americans cheered briefly. The response was merciless. A second Panther rotated its turret and fired point-blank into the depression. The blast erased the defensive pocket in a single moment. Bodies were thrown. The lieutenant vanished in smoke and debris. Whatever structure had existed died with him. From that point onward, resistance fractured completely. Some Americans fought on in pairs, backing each other instinctively. Others crawled away, wounded, dragging themselves through mud and shell holes. Fear became physical, a weight pressing against the chest, slowing reaction time. Dulling thought, German infantry moved through the aftermath methodically, clearing positions, calling targets for armor support. This was no longer a battle, it was a sweep. Yet even now, isolated acts of defiance flared up. A rifleman emptied his magazine into advancing soldiers before being cut down. A wounded sergeant detonated a grenade as Germans approached his position, killing himself and 2 attackers. These actions changed nothing strategically, but they mattered to the men performing them. By the end of Part 4, the ground itself seemed exhausted. Smoke hung thick. Fires burned unchecked. The Americans who still lived had either gone to ground or fled into terrain where pursuit would be costly. The Germans halted again, not because resistance remained strong, but because objectives had been achieved. The weight of iron had done its work. Dawn was breaking, but it offered little comfort. Smoke and haze from fires and explosions hung like a curtain over Morta. The ground, churned to mud by repeated tank treads and artillery impacts, slowed every movement. The few Americans who had survived Part 4 now faced the impossible calculus of survival versus duty. Every decision could mean life or death. Callahan's mind raced. The last hours had taught him one brutal truth. Mobility, however limited, was survival. Even stationary guns, like his M5, had to move constantly to avoid becoming a static target. But with half the company gone and ammunition running low, options were scarce. He surveyed the battlefield. Destroyed Panthers littered hedgerows. Smoldering Sherman hulks glowed orange in the early light. Every wreck told a story of near misses and desperate courage. The 823rd's remaining guns were spread across the eastern approach, every crew relying on sound and instinct. Firing blindly at muzzle flashes had become routine, almost a grim dance. Every flash marked a target. Every detonation provided information. But now, with the fog lifting slightly, the Germans could maneuver with greater confidence. Visibility reached roughly 200 yards. The math that had once favored the Americans in fog was shifting against them. Callahan signaled to his loader, ramming the next armor-piercing round home. Their M5 was dug behind a small stone wall, only partially concealed and vulnerable from multiple angles. To the north, 3 Panthers were beginning a flanking maneuver. They were fast, calculating, and methodical elite SS troops in their element. Callahan weighed his options. If he fired now, the flash would give away his position. If he waited, the flanking tanks might get a direct shot. He chose action. The gun fired, recoil rattling through the stone wall. Flames illuminated the fog briefly. One Panther staggered, hit in the side, smoke rolling from its man. The enemy responded immediately. The other 2 tanks pivoted toward him, firing in a deadly synchronized volley. Shells struck the wall, sending fragments into the earth, dirt and stone spitting around the M5. The crew ducked instinctively. Callahan counted the seconds, calculated trajectories, and signaled the next displacement. They heaved the gun 30 yards east, barely clearing incoming fire. Another position was dug quickly. Rounds loaded. Meanwhile, German infantry began probing closer, Panzer grenadiers methodically searching for hidden gun positions. Each engagement was a microcosm of the larger battle. A single burst from a Thompson submachine gun could hold them back temporarily, but it revealed the gun's location. The Americans had learned to fire in measured bursts, conserve ammunition, and exploit terrain wherever possible. Every shell, every bullet, every movement had to be justified by survival. By 0730, the battlefield had stabilized temporarily. The Germans had overrun 3 more American gun positions, but the remaining M5 South had destroyed 6 Panthers. Their crews improvised to the limit. The key had shifted. The objective was no longer destroying tanks, but buying time. Every second of delay prevented the German armored columns from consolidating and pressing the breakthrough toward a Every gun, every crew that survived, extended the window for reinforcements to arrive. The 30th Infantry Division's remaining soldiers had fallen back to secondary defensive lines, relying on artillery observers on Hill 314 to direct fire against the German advance. The strategic importance of observation was undeniable. Without accurate calls, each American crew might have been annihilated before repositioning. Callahan and the remaining crew, moving like shadows, saw a Panther immobilized by their earlier fire. Its turret still spinning, the engine stalled. A pair of Panzer grenadiers approached, attempting to salvage the tank. Callahan considered the risk. With limited ammunition, engaging infantry was costly, but ignoring them risked the Panther being repaired and fired again. He gave the order for controlled bursts, Thompson and rifle coordinating to force the infantry back, buying precious minutes. Smoke, fire, and debris combined into a surreal landscape, a battlefield more abstract than concrete, where every flash illuminated both opportunity and danger. By 08, the first Allied reinforcements arrived. Shermans from the 743rd Tank Battalion pushed into view, from the west, engines grating over mud and debris. But the math remained brutal. Panthers outranged the Shermans and were still concentrated along key positions. Callahan knew that survival now was a combination of improvisation, calculated aggression, and timing. He moved to the next firing position, signaling his loader and gunner. Every action followed the same logic. Fire at the enemy. Displace immediately. Stay alive. By mid-morning, the tactical value of Company A's desperate resistance became clear. Though 5 guns remained operational, their presence had delayed the German advance for hours. This delay allowed artillery and infantry to reorganize, allowed reinforcements to push up, and prevented a rapid German breakout. The M5 South had proven that even obsolete weapons, in skilled hands under desperate circumstances, could exert influence far beyond their mechanical limitations. And yet, every second was a test of endurance. Smoke, fire, mud, and the psychological strain of facing superior armor without cover created an environment where mistakes could be fatal. Callahan's crew, exhausted and bloodied, understood the calculus of the battlefield. They would survive only if they maintained discipline, coordination, and constant movement. The first few hours had been a test of courage. The next would demand cunning and resilience. By 0900, the fog had nearly lifted entirely, leaving a battlefield transformed. Smoke still curled from smoldering tanks and shattered trees, but the landscape had become brutally clear. Callahan's M5 gun crew, mud-streaked and exhausted, now faced a new reality. The Germans could see them. The calculus that had once favored blind firing in fog was gone. Every Panther, every Panzer IV could maneuver, aim, and fire with precision. The survival margin had shrunk to a razor's edge. Callahan quickly assessed the situation. Company A had 5 operational M5 guns, each manned by men teetering on physical and mental exhaustion. Across the field, German armor had regrouped, forming a semicircle to isolate American positions. The flanking Panthers that had been probing earlier were now part of a coordinated advance, using the hedgerows and broken terrain to their advantage. Every movement of the remaining American guns could be observed. Every flash would betray their position. The 743rd Sherman tanks, advancing from the west, added a complicated variable. Their 75mm guns could penetrate Panzer IV armor at medium range, but struggled against the frontal armor of Panthers. The M5 South were too slow to relocate rapidly, but they still had a crucial role: delay and channel enemy movement. Callahan realized that the remaining guns had to hold their line at all costs, or the German armored thrust could break through toward, endangering the entire Allied advance. At 0915, artillery observers on Hill 314 began calling fire missions. Every flash of a German tank or gun emplacement was quickly targeted by American 105mm howitzers, creating intermittent craters and smoke plumes across the battlefield. While not sufficient to destroy Panthers outright, the artillery suppressed Panzer Grenadiers and forced German tanks to button up, slowing their advance. Callahan coordinated sporadic M5 fire with these barrages, calculating deflection, distance, and timing with deadly precision. By 0930, the battlefield had become a lethal mosaic of fire and movement. The Germans adjusted tactics, moving armor in small units to probe weaknesses, while infantry sought to neutralize exposed M5 crews. Each American firing position became a focal point of concentrated enemy fire. Callahan's loader, gunner, and ammunition handler worked like clockwork, cycling rounds into the M5 under constant stress. Every shot fired at a visible target was a gamble, hit and survival, miss and possible annihilation. At 0945, German infantry made a concerted push toward Callahan's eastern flank. Panzer Grenadiers, using smoke and hedgerow cover, attempted to overrun an M5 position previously abandoned by another crew. Callahan's Thompson bursts erupted, forcing the attackers back momentarily. The flash illuminated faces twisted with fear and determination, both American and German, but every engagement revealed their positions to advancing German armor. The M5 crews had to displace constantly, digging new positions under the pressure of encroaching tanks and infantry. By 1000, the pattern was clear. American defense relied on coordination between static M5 guns, Shermans, and artillery observers. Callahan realized that without improvisation and rapid displacement, the remaining guns would be destroyed sequentially. They began a rhythm: fire, displace, dig in, fire, again. Every Panther destroyed was a hard-won victory. Every missed shot was a lesson in deadly precision. The Sherman Battalion now engaged the southern German column. Shells screamed across the landscape, and armored units exchanged fire at extreme range. Panthers outgunned the Shermans, but the combined pressure of M5 fire and artillery slowed their advance. Callahan's calculations focused on aiming. With limited armor-piercing rounds left, every shot had to count. His crew had already learned the delicate balance between aggression and conservation. At 10:15, a Panther approached directly from the north, hull down behind a hedgerow, turret scanning. Callahan's gunner had the range dialed in, the loader ready with an AP round. Both guns fired in synchrony. The round struck the turret's mantlet, spinning the Panther in place. Engine smoking, the tactical advantage of skill and patience was clear. Even obsolete weapons could neutralize elite armor when used correctly. By late morning, the American defensive line had stabilized. German columns, though still numerous, were delayed, fragmented, and forced to fight cautiously. Every hour bought the Allies precious time to consolidate, reinforce, and eventually prepare air support. The battlefield was a chaotic mix of fire, mud, smoke, and steel, a living testament to improvisation under pressure. Callahan's crew, though fatigued and bloodied, understood a crucial truth. They had turned the battlefield into a calculated chessboard. Each movement, each shot, each repositioning had delayed a superior force and ensured the survival of the larger defensive line. The day's mathematics were brutal, but discipline, courage, and improvisation kept them alive. By noon, the fog had completely lifted over Morta. The battlefield stretched in jagged, ruined lines of hedgerows, cratered fields, and smoldering tanks. Callahan's M5 crew, filthy, bloodied, and exhausted, now faced the tangible cost of the night and morning's engagement. The 5 remaining guns had held, despite being vastly outnumbered, against a German armored force that, only hours earlier, had seemed unstoppable. The Sherman Battalion continued engaging German armor in the southern sector. Despite superior Panther armor, the combination of artillery, concentrated M5 fire, and Sherman harassment slowed the German advance enough to prevent a breakthrough toward Av. The 30th Infantry Division consolidated its positions, using Hill 314 as an observation and artillery control point. From there, American forward observers could see every German movement, directing fire on concentrations of tanks and infantry alike. Every column became a target. Every maneuver slowed. Company A's crew counted their losses. 5 guns destroyed, roughly 30 men killed or wounded, 12 missing, 11 confirmed German tanks destroyed by M5 guns, at least 6 more damaged. The arithmetic was grim. 12 guns against over 200 tanks, 5 operational remaining, yet the delay they caused shifted the operational tempo of the entire offensive. The Germans could not advance with speed. Their momentum was broken. At 1300, German units began withdrawing from positions east of Morta to regroup with the main column. The screening force that had attacked Callahan's line had accomplished its mission, drawing fire and attention while the main assault had shifted south. Company A had fought a diversion, yet the tactical effect was decisive. The German advance had slowed, fragmentation set in, and American reinforcements had arrived in time to prevent catastrophe. Callahan and his men spent the afternoon recovering salvageable equipment from destroyed positions. 3 M5 guns could be repaired. Ammunition was collected from multiple fields. Bodies, American and German, were tended as best possible. The human cost was stark. The battlefield a mix of courage and tragedy. Battalion headquarters, assessing the results, noted that the delay caused by Company A and the 30th Infantry Division allowed the Allies to stabilize defenses, reinforce forward positions, and prepare for coordinated counterattacks. By August 10th, Operation Luttich had stalled completely. The German offensive, initially designed to cut through to Avranches and isolate American forces in Brittany, had lost all momentum. Over 120 German tanks had been destroyed or rendered inoperative. The failure at Morta, caused by the combination of static gun positions, courage, and improvisation under extreme conditions, had strategic consequences far beyond the immediate battlefield. The German 7th Army and 5th Panzer Army found themselves increasingly encircled, weakened in other sectors. The Canadian 1st Army faced reduced opposition from the north, and the American push from the south encountered fewer obstacles. By late August, the encirclement of German forces in Normandy was complete, resulting in tens of thousands of troops captured or destroyed, hundreds of tanks eliminated, and the effective destruction of German operational strength in the region. The 823rd Tank Destroyer Battalion received the Presidential Unit Citation for extraordinary heroism. Company A's actions, particularly those of Sergeant Robert Callahan and his M5 gun crew, were highlighted. 12 guns facing 200 tanks, firing blind in fog, and holding a critical line for 4 hours at immense personal risk. The after-action report recommended conversion to self-propelled tank destroyers, night fighting training, and better coordination with infantry. But it also emphasized the impact of determined defenders using obsolete weapons effectively. Callahan returned to Pennsylvania in 1946. Like many veterans, he rarely spoke of Morta. Most of the 823rd Tank Destroyer Battalion were deactivated by November 1945. Survivors scattered, records archived, memories faded from public consciousness. The men who fought at Morta had faced near impossible odds, fought with weapons deemed outdated, and achieved disproportionate effect through courage, improvisation, and discipline. The battlefield at Morta remained a symbol of tactical improvisation. The M5 guns were phased out of frontline service by 1945, replaced with self-propelled M10 tank destroyers that combined mobility with firepower. But the lessons of Morta endured. Determined defenders, when properly supported and coordinated, could delay, disrupt, and destroy enemy forces far superior in numbers and technology. The combination of terrain, observation, courage, and tactical flexibility mattered more than the perceived obsolescence of equipment. Today, a memorial near Morta commemorates the 30th Infantry Division and the 823rd Tank Destroyer Battalion. Few know the details of Company A's morning on August 7th, firing blind into fog, delaying for SS Panzer divisions, and shaping the course of the Normandy campaign. Sergeant Robert Callahan and his crew exemplified a principle timeless in warfare. Skill, courage, and determination can make the impossible achievable, even under conditions doctrine labels hopeless.